welcome to the Straight Red Card. We're back. I mean, it's World Cup time, and it's hard to believe, Brett, 4 years ago we were doing this show. And I mean,
and getting threats.
Yeah, being threatened
on our first couple shows, you know.
Who was threatening us? It was like Serbian fans.
Serbia.
Yeah, Serbian fans were upset about our predictions about what's going to happen to them in their group, and we were absolutely right on, if I remember correctly.
Group too, yeah.
Yeah, we picked the entire group correctly, but that didn't stop the death threats. Maybe we jinxed the Serbian team. Anyhow, we're hoping not to get death threats this time around, but we're not going to make any World Cup predictions necessarily right now. But we are going to talk about, what's been going on this last week and a half, which was, history was made in many ways, right? I mean, Landon Donovan. I mean, everybody's been talking about this, so, yeah. Are we beating a bit of a dead horse? Kind of, probably. But, just some of the things that were said out there. And I really do feel, Brett, like a lot of people have bought into a lot of the things that Klinsmann said, which I believe aren't true about Landon Donovan, that there are a few players a little bit better than him. And there are a lot of people out there, a lot of people who supported Landon and a lot of other people who said, yeah, that's good. I'm glad. It's time to move on. I guess you move on from maybe as Timmy Howard said, the best player, one of the best one or two players on the field when he's out there for the American side. And I know I'm gonna trust Timmy Howard on this, because the stories that are coming out about the relationship between Landon Donovan and Jurgen Klinsmann being somewhat of a bumpy one. I don't know what you've heard, Brett, but that, to me, was really, I think, why this happened. I don't think it was about Landon Donovan not being able to contribute to this team anymore.
Well, I thought it was a little strange because, I thought even if Donovan had lost a step and he's not as quick as he used to be 4 years ago, I still feel like he was a optimal player to play off the bench. Seriously, when could we have boasted saying, hey, we're bringing Landon Donovan off the bench?
Yeah.
And, will he, can we arguably say that, I like Wando, and I think he's a clutch player, and he almost scored a couple of nice goals yesterday.
Yeah.
But would I pick a roster with Wando over Donovan? No. I wouldn't pick a roster. Even if you picture Donovan as a striker, and only a striker, he's proven he can play outside.
Yeah,
that's all he's done pretty much.
And
so, would you pick a roster with Davis over Donovan?
Right.
I wouldn't.
I wouldn't either. And in his selective way, Jurgen Klinsmann has sort of narrowed it down to, well, Landon Donovan is only a striker to me. Okay, well that seems pretty narrow. That seems like pretty narrow thinking to me. I think he can still play out wide. Listen, I've been watching. He's not had a great season this year, but to say that he's not fast enough to play out wide, or his fitness isn't good enough to run around and play defense all game long, I think is off base. We saw him at the beep test at camp, and he was one of the last few players still standing and running his ass off during the beep test, which is, by the way, a speed and fitness test combined, where they run the players until they nearly collapse, until they do collapse in some cases. A lot of the guys did collapse. Landon Donovan was one of the couple guys left, and he didn't even collapse after it was over. He walked it off. At least that's what I heard. Anyhow, so I'm not buying this that he couldn't play out left or couldn't play out right. I think he could. He still offers that option, right? So, to me, this gets down to what happened last year, Brett, when there were 11 players that Brian Strauss interviewed, some of those quotes were harsher than others about Jurgen Klinsmann. And I've just, rumors are rumors, but one of the rumors is that Bocanegra and, Landon Donovan were considered kind of the lead dissenters of that, that article. That may or may not true, and Brian Strauss is not going to tell us because he's a good journalist, and he shouldn't tell us who said what. But and not to mention a few other times where Landon sort of not disagreed on purpose, but sort of said things that were at odds with what Jurgen Klinsmann was saying about the team at the time. I think Jurgen Klinsmann's the kind of guy who does not like to be betrayed in any small form at all. And you can get rid of a guy like Bocanegra, by the way, who got the axe permanently after that article came out. He played that last game, right? That was it. He was done. And I heard that maybe Gomez was also one of those folks who may have said something that Jurgen didn't like, and he felt slighted by it. So, this is all rumor mill stuff. But to me, there's something to it. When more than one person that I know who's a respected journalist says the same thing, intimates these things. Stephen Goff was very clear that the relationship between Jurgen Klinsmann and Donovan was a bad one, and the ties had been broken in his eyes forever. So you can't, although Jurgen Klinsmann couldn't just cut Landon Donovan off of this team for that, like he did Bocanegra gets cut, who cares, right? Who really cares? It's not like he was the best American player to ever play the game. But you can't just let Landon Donovan go. People are saying, well, it's because he took that break. I'm not buying that, Brett. I'm not buying that as the reason that Jurgen's upset with Landon.
No, there has to be something else. If it is a personal decision, and it'll never be announced as a personal decision.
Well, 10 years from now, when it's a book, right?
Well, that's also going to be coming. That will come from one side standpoint. You'll ever have both sides saying, yes, this was a personal decision. And quite frankly, if it was a personal decision, it wouldn't have been because of the hiatus that Donovan took. Because, in all honesty, that's not going to do anything. There were a couple games in there where he missed when he, should have been with the team. But, if he needed to take the time, he needed to take the time. And I don't think that's going to cause a strife for that long of a period.
Yeah.
He may not have been able to see the roster for a while because Klinsmann's like, well, you didn't support your team. But to be frank, Chandler did the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Took the entire qualifier off and managed to make the squad. So again, it can't be because of that hiatus. Because, like I said, there's another case out there that takes a much bigger, a time frame there.
Yeah. So it's not.
If it's a personal decision, it has to be something else. And like you mentioned earlier, maybe Klinsmann doesn't like being disagreed with. But then again, what manager likes their players disagreeing with them like that?
Right.
And not necessarily publicly coming out and saying it, but more or less behind closed doors publicly saying it.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't know a manager in the world if they found out that it was certain players that said those things, that they'd be okay with it. And again, like you'd mentioned, you could drop Gomez, you could drop Bocanegra from the rosters, because, they're off and on at that point. Gomez, I think would have been tougher drop than Boca was, but regardless, you couldn't drop Donovan off completely.
Mm-hmm.
And, he brought him in for the Gold Cup to star there. Brought him in as a super sub in some of the ending qualifiers, and then brought him into the 30-man roster. At that point, he has that ability to say, I liked what I saw from this player better, without coming off the bad guy. Although everybody's painting him off as a bad guy because, well, everybody, for the most part, the majority of the U.S. fan base wants Donovan on the team.
Yeah. Well, and can you imagine if Jurgen Klinsmann steps up to the microphone before the 30-man was picked and said, Landon Donovan's not going to be on my 30 because he and I don't see eye to eye. What the hell? That would not have gone off. Then you got to explain, okay, you don't see eye to eye, or you don't like Landon Donovan, or you don't like something he said. Then you have to explain all that crap. And then it's even worse. It's easier to just string them along. And as a lot of the players that were cut felt, Jurgen Klinsmann had already made his decision about who the 23 were. And Parker said it. maybe it's
Clarence Goodson said it too.
Yeah, maybe that's sour apples. Landon Donovan said that might be the case.
Well, and I think when you look at other players, I think Goodson had maybe a larger room to say that, because he was called up for majority of the World Cup qualifier games. Mm-hmm. He played in a number of them, and I mean, mind you, he had his mistakes, but he played okay as far as I can recall.
Yeah.
And he flat out said that in the 30-man roster, he felt that he was out there playing, and Klinsmann had two different sides. Goodson didn't actually play against a lot of the players in the camp. He actually played with his own group of players that Klinsmann separated them into.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's very possible that Klinsmann pretty much had his set 23 down, or maybe it was 25, and he was depicting on the last two, But personal grudges aside, if he did have that, he should have still took Donovan anyways.
Yeah.
If anything, it does offer another weapon, even if you don't like a guy, if he's a quality player. And God knows, I mean, the U.S. is getting better, but we're not, chock full of quality players.
Right, with that kind of experience and that kind of instinct, with that kind of passing ability.
Not only that, but just the respect that he'd bring as well.
Right.
I mean, how many other players in our team will command the respect, that Donovan does? And I'm not saying that teams like Germany or Portugal or anybody like that is going to back off of Donovan, but they'll expect something from him. Mm-hmm. They'll expect that he's got, they'll give him a little more respect than, say, a Bedoya, who, mind you, I like Bedoya, he's doing well, but, I mean, Donovan's going to get a little more respect from other opposing players than Bedoya will.
No, I agree. And I think blaming this on having Julian Green on the team isn't fair. I think Julian Green was on this team almost automatically as soon as he decided he was going to play for the United States and committed himself to that by playing for us. I think that was a given. I think Julian Green's going. He's the young guy, right? He's the young gun on the team that's coming along for this ride because Jurgen Klinsmann sees him as the future. No, I mean, there are other guys that you could argue shouldn't be on this team, and Landon Donovan should. But, it's hard to name. Brad Davis comes off as an obvious guy. I mean, he played all right last night, right? I mean, he played well. Mix Discaroo played well last night, but I would have taken Landon over Mix if that had to be one or the other. We talked about Wondolowski already. These are guys that made the team that I think Landon Donovan just provides a little something more. I could be wrong. So, it's a risk for Jurgen because and it's a lot of pressure on the guys that many people see who got the spot rather than Landon. Now, they got to play well because if they don't, people are going to say, well, shit, Landon Donovan could have put that in the back of the net. I hate to be Brad Davis right now.
Maybe that'll get them to play at the top of their game. Who knows?
It might. Of course, I think Jurgen's trying to take that pressure off of Bedoya and Brad Davis, and by saying things like, well, I only see Landon as a striker. Well, I guess that puts all the pressure on the strikers then, because they better perform, or else people are going to say, well, if we had Landon Donovan, we would have done better against Team A or B or C.
I never really liked Donovan as a striker with the U.S. national team. I'd always prefer his ability out wide, but then again, it always relied on his speed and his burst of speed, actually, more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, he did well in the Gold Cup. Yeah, I mean, he did well in the Gold Cup playing striker. Did he not?
That was also the B Squad Gold Cup. I mean, there were some teams that brought some quality players, but as a whole, I mean,
a lot of guys from that B Squad Gold Cup are on this national team.
I'm not referring to the U.S. teams. I'm referring to everybody else in the Gold Cup.
Oh, well, yeah. So, yeah, the competition wasn't the best. And Landon Donovan...
Don't get me wrong. I think Donovan played very well in the Gold Cup, and he showed it.
He was the MVP.
Yeah.
Right?
So I'm not taking anything away from him. I'm just saying. He played well as a striker, but then again, it was also not against that quality of players or quality of teams.
Right.
And the quality of teams that we did play against, some of them, there were still some... Mexico obviously still would have had some quality players, but then again, they were struggling that entire time period anyways. Mm-hmm. They could have brought their A squad, and it still would have been not much... I mean, it would have been... We probably still would have had a
sketchy
2-0 game.
Yeah, sketchy at best. They were going through a real rut. But in the end, this is still Landon Donovan's fault. I say all that. I say Landon should be on this team. If you go purely by his ability, his instinct, his leadership, his skill, and the one thing that Jurgen Klinsmann says on the new ESPN series Part 2 that we have not heard him say to the press, but he says it on that program, is that one of his determining factors will be character. Character. Now, what does that mean? Why doesn't he say it in the press now? Well, he doesn't want anyone who was cut to be thought of because they just didn't have the character. But honestly, one of the things that Jurgen Klinsmann puts above many other things is loyalty and being on the same page as Jurgen Klinsmann, i.e., not even subtle dissent and certainly not all-out betrayal, which is what that article with Brian Strauss seem to intimate to him, I am sure, at the time. It almost sounded like a call by some certain players who were quoted to get rid of Jurgen Klinsmann. And I can only imagine that if that is the case, then, and Landon Donovan didn't play his political cards the right way and stay on the same page with Jurgen Klinsmann. And it's obvious that he didn't, because look at Jurgen Klinsmann's son, Jonathan Klinsmann, sends out a tweet that says, ha, 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 Landon Donovan. He's laughing about Landon Donovan being cut. Don't tell me that at some point at the dinner table between the Klinsmann family, this wasn't discussed in some way. You don't have someone just tweet out something like that in a vile, disgusting, fashion, a very unprofessional fashion, without there being some sort of internal knowledge that Jonathan Klinsmann has or knows about that we're just not going to find out about. I mean, listen, no one's really asking a whole lot about that tweet, but that tweet to me told me everything I needed to know about how Jurgen Klinsmann felt about Landon Donovan. I mean, what'd you think about that tweet?
Oh, it clearly was something Klinsmann said at the dinner table, because, I mean, otherwise, why would this kid have some form of, like, I guess it's not a grudge per se, but something to vent about Donovan?
Yeah. Exactly.
Quite frank, and he quickly removed it, probably after his dad scolded him.
Oh, his dad said he gave him a call, and that Jonathan got a lesson, quick lesson on how the negatives of social media. And
and that's another thing I do chalk it up to, is it's a kid being stupid on social media. And I mean, again though, I agree with you. It has to stem from something that was said, like you said, around the dinner table, in passing. Maybe after reading that article and, Klinsmann saying some expletives, but... Yeah. What
was Jurgen's other statement? He said he didn't know why his son made that comment because, after all, his son, when he was a kid, had posters of Landon Donovan on his wall. Is that really a legitimate answer to that question? That's a bullshit answer. The real answer is, yeah, I said some things to my son about Landon Donovan in private conversation that I probably shouldn't have. And that's why he did what he did. But, of course, you can't say that. That's not the politically smart thing at that point to say. The best way to do it is what Jurgen Klinsmann has been doing this whole time with the Landon Donovan situation, and that's deflect it.
Did you see when Mike McGee officially wrote himself off of any future... call-ups for the national team while under Klinsmann?
Yeah, he mocked Jonathan Klinsmann. He mocks Klinsmann's son. Perfect. Ha, 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 ha. That was awesome. Another awesome. first-class guy, Mike McGee, by the way. Mm. First class in all ways. You guys are lucky to have him there in Chicago. Maybe we should talk about some of the other guys that got cut, because, one thing that Cameron, Goodson, we were talking about earlier, Goodson comes out to the press and says, hey, I didn't agree that I got cut, and I thought the way that Klinsmann did it to me sucked. and I thought he was really kind of a dishonest jerk about it. That's what he said in so many words, right?
It's a way to paraphrase it.
I'm paraphrasing it as if that's what Goodson really wanted to say, and that's sort of how it came off. And to some people, it came off as whiny and complaining. But there's one guy who should probably keep his trap shut because of the possibility that either Gonzo, Beasler, or Cameron get injured. Then you can't just bring 3 CBs to a World Cup. If one of those 3 guys goes down with an injury, guess who's up next? Goodson. Well, Goodson just said goodbye to that possibility. I guarantee if Gonzo goes down with an injury, I'll tell you who's going now, because he kept enough of his mouth shut and didn't make it personal. That's Parkhurst would probably go as the extra CB at this point. Just my thought.
Probably.
I don't know. What did you think about Goodson, the way he handled that?
I mean, he did come off, not necessarily whiny per se, but it was very personal in saying, well, he brings up a good point. He wanted a reason why he was cut, and Klinsmann said, we'll talk after the World Cup.
Yeah, well.
And somebody who was expecting to go, who played in a lot of the qualifiers, who figured that he was going to go, and all of a sudden gets cut. I mean, it's got to make you wonder. It's like, what I do wrong? He felt that he was having a strong camp.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
well, you can look at this two ways. One, Jurgen Klinsmann doesn't necessarily owe anybody an explanation if you want to play it the hardcore manager direction, or you could play it the other direction and say, all the guys that contributed to helping us get this far by qualifying for the World Cup, which Goodson was certainly one of those people, at least deserve a small explanation as to why they didn't make the team. And I think that was, I tend to lean more towards at being nice about it if possible. And if Landon Donovan gets a reason, it seems a little bit of favoritism that everybody else doesn't get one. But hey, maybe Landon Donovan's earned it in Jurgen's eyes, or Jurgen wants to, of course, get out in front of what could possibly be a major press nightmare for himself by letting Landon know, here's how I see it. Which, by the way, I really doubt that's how he saw it. He just felt that, as we've now discussed fully, that Landon just wasn't one of his guys anymore because of, the relationship had a falling out based on things that Landon Donovan might have said in the press. All right, let's get to yesterday's starting lineup. First of all, what do you think? Is this starting lineup we saw last night going to be the starting lineup we see first game of the World Cup?
I don't know. I mean, in all honesty, what's our other right back option? In all honesty, you could have Cameron play right back, or you could have Yedlin playing right back. Or I don't even know why Johnson was over there, and then we had Chandler play on at left back later on in the game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it wasn't until the second half before Johnson finally started cutting more into the middle, and that was fine. It worked out well there. But
I really think Johnson's out there for one reason and one reason only. Because Johnson's one of the fastest sons of guns on the team. And who's going to be out there with him once we face Portugal? That's where Ronaldo likes to hang out, right? Yeah. So you put our fastest 2 guys out on that right wing, because we need a tie out of that Portugal game, at the very least. Win would be great. Tie would be awesome. Of course, that's all, after we beat Ghana, right? That's the way this whole thing works. You beat Ghana, you tie Portugal, you hope you get in with 4 points. You're not going to tie Portugal if you don't have anybody on that. That's why Brad Evans was cut, frankly. Right? He's slow.
Yeah, he's slow. And I think that's the main reason why Cameron's been pushed into a center back. I mean, I know he plays right back for his club.
For Stoke. Yep.
And does well enough there. But in all honesty, he's not the fastest person out there. So I think you're right. This is more of a tactical reason as far as who we're playing. We're playing Ghana. We're playing Portugal. You got to have speed on the wings.
Yeah, I mean, look at our wings.
We're not going to get the speed out of our wings. Bedoya and Zusi aren't going to be the fastest ones out there, so they're not going to be able to cover back. And
right.
I mean, they will cover back, but they won't be able to cover back and retrace if, say, if Evans were to get beat or if Cameron were to get beat.
You have to overcompensate at this point, right? Because exactly. Zusi and Bedoya are actually not fast at all. They're very medium-paced guys. So if you want to cover their ass, you got to have the three fastest guys on the team, probably Beasley, Chandler, and Fabian Johnson. Those are your three fastest dudes on the team, and guess what? Those are probably the guys that are going to end up, as the number one choices for Klinsmann at the back positions.
Again, that's why I think Cameron was pushed more in the center, and I think that's probably one reason why Goodson ended up getting cut.
Yep, and that's why I think we saw Evans get cut too. I think he's just too slow. He's just too slow. I mean, he's got great instinct, but when you're playing world-class players like Ronaldo, Ronaldo's just going to go fly by a guy like Brad Evans. He's not even going to blink. So, yeah, I mean, I think this was very tactical on Jurgen Klinsmann's part. Now, center backs. So last night we had Beasler and Cameron start, and then we saw Gonzo come in later. No John Anthony Brooks out there. Many say he probably won't get much of a look at the World Cup unless a lot of injuries happen. And I think you're right. It was Klinsmann's idea at the beginning to bring some young guys to get that World Cup experience, whether they saw the field or not. And Brooks is another one of those guys, along with Green, that he was going to bring hell or high water. And Goodson was just considered surplus because you already had Cameron plays a lot like Goodson in many ways. He might even be more athletic than Goodson. So, and he has that diversity to play out on back position if you really need him to. So, yeah, you take Cameron, you take Beasler for sure. Gonzo's the one everybody's kind of had an issue with because he's had moments where his head's just not there. It's just not in the game. And he's been burned.
I mean, I completely agree. And I guess the big question, I mean, you talk about Brooks getting brought in just for the experience and that's it. But, I mean, you also got to think he has experience with his club playing with the first team as well. So, I mean, he's actually getting playing time. So,
yeah.
I mean, it's not out of the question to say that he deserved a spot, say, over a Goodson in this matter. But Goodson does have the experience. He has played a lot more games at the international level than Brooks has. And I don't know. Maybe it's kind of a mix between both. Maybe the fact that he has playing and he looked a little sharp in camp and it's going to give him good experience and maybe a hungry drive to push forward into the next cycle.
So let's move to the holding midfield spot. CDM, the guy that's going to play, because it looks like we're going to play a diamond in the middle. I mean, for all intents and purposes, that's what it looks like. Jurgen Klinsmann wants Michael Bradley to have the freedom to do what Michael Bradley does well, like he did against Mexico in the first half. And Jones, I think, for the first time ever, actually played the role that Beckerman plays like a scientist, like a mad scientist. Beckerman, Mr. Bricks in his shoes, slow Beckerman, with instincts like, a hawk, this guy, Beckerman. Beckerman doesn't even see the field last night. But Jones gets the start, plays the whole 90. And for once, Jones never crept forward. He played that pocket role just like Beckerman did. Maybe not as well in some ways, but I think he did finally the job that we all thought and hoped he would do earlier.
Let's say it's a position that everybody was hoping that he would play. When he made that one-time switch over, we're like, all right, well, we got our true number 6 there. We got our big, our defensive mid.
Yeah,
he's gonna be our powerhouse. And all of a sudden, whether it's Klinsmann playing him in a more advanced role because maybe he felt he had the better, vision as a whole, or if it was, basically the center mid duo had freedom to do what they wanted to do, and Jones just crept up all the time. But yeah, I thought he looked good out back there. He didn't make that many mistakes. He did well to close out their attack, and a lot of times he broke it up nicely. I think one thing he brings over Beckman is that he is quicker. and he can get to those plays a lot faster. So I agree. I think we're going to see a diamond. Depending on the team we're playing and how much we're getting pressed, I think Bradley may push back a bit more and almost go back to more of a 2 defensive mid to an extent.
Yeah, the old Bob Bradley lineup, the 4-2-2-2, with the two central midfielders playing a more defensive role side by side.
Yeah, but between the two of them, Jones and Bradley, when it comes to the spring out attack, if you do go back to more of a defensive mind and you have to spring out and attack, the person I want crashing that box as quickly as he can is going to be Bradley.
Me too.
And he'll run up and down that field without getting tired. He made several mistakes last night. Wasn't his sharpest game. Wasn't a bad game by any means. It just wasn't your typical Michael Bradley game.
Yeah, he looked at a couple times. He made some bad passes. He lost the ball. This was not the same Bradley we saw against Mexico. It's hard to say exactly why, since they didn't really press. Azerbaijan didn't really press forward and press the attack or defensively. They weren't playing very high, so it should have given Bradley time. But he had some rough moments last night. But,
everybody's allowed a game.
Yeah. I mean, he's just coming off one of the best games he's ever played, I think, as a United States men's national team, top of the diamond guy, which I think, that's his spot. I think Bradley's the one guy there's just no question about. I was just a little surprised that Beckerman didn't see the field at all. I thought he would show up at the 60th minute and take over for Jones. But I think what Klinsmann is saying is Jones is really his guy. That's his guy. Now on the wings, that was also not so surprising now that there's no Donovan. It was Jozy and Bedoya. And you know what? They played all right. They played fine. I thought it was interesting, though, that Mix came in and played pretty well, not as a CAM, because that's sometimes what he's brought in as, but as a right midfielder in the diamond. I thought he did okay. He didn't have a whole lot of time, but he scored a goal. I don't think you can put too much into that. Kind of ricocheted around, and we were due a goal. And I think Bedoya or Jozy would have put that goal in as well, had it dropped to their feet.
Assuming they were in the same position. But yeah, and then sometimes that's the key. I mean, I believe what happened, in fact, was the ball's crossed. He was the one who headed it over to Bradley. Bradley took the one-time shot at the 18, saved off the line by a defender, and went straight to Mix, and Mix slotted it home.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he kept in. He played. That's the one thing, you see with Wando, and that's probably why he, got the nod as well, is he has that vision. He may not be, Wando's not the fastest, striker out there. He's not going to dribble you. He's not going to do anything fancy like that, but he knows where he needs to be.
Yeah.
And he's, he shows up when it needs to be, whenever the ball's there,
Instinct.
Instinct's the best way to describe it, because, it's not going to be one of those things that you're going to see a lot of strikers, just instinctively know where they need to be.
Right.
I mean, they're supposed to at that point.
Right.
But not everybody knows it, and you realize where the defense is shifting, you see where the holes are, and you're like, okay, well, if I'm going to get a chance, this is where it's going to be.
Right. Well, I think what it showed us was, in the case of Mix, and even Brad Davis and Johansson, you bring any of those guys in the last 10, 15 minutes of a game and you need a goal, you can feel pretty comfortable that these are guys that can probably do that for you. And I think that's something that last night I think we can all feel more comfortable about. Now, whether or not you want to make the argument that any of those guys should be starting instead of, then, that's a whole other debate, and I don't think we're quite there yet. Now, Dempsey didn't get to play last night. So, Wando got the start, and then Johansson came in, which tells me that Johansson is third in depth right now behind Dempsey and Wanilowski at that spot that's going to be played right. And he let Jozy play all 90. So, I guess the question is, after Johansson scores last night playing with Jozy, and everybody now, after Jozy apparently didn't play his best game, I don't think he was horrible, but now everybody's saying start Johansson over Jozy, but Johansson's not going to give you the same sort of, girth and body up there to hold the ball that Jozy's going to give you.
mean, even the limited time that Johansson was in there with Jozy, you saw the different styles of strikers that they are.
Yes.
You saw Jozy continuing playing the role that Klinsmann's asking him to play, and that's the target role. He might not be the world's best target striker, and yes, his touch isn't the best in the world, and he does make mistakes from time to time. I thought he had a pretty good game. I don't know why everybody's giving him so much shit. It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I understand he makes mistakes, and he's probably not the best decision making of all the games I've seen him play. But I thought his hold-up play was solid. I thought he brought the midfield into the attack, and again, it wasn't very much a pressing opposing team, but I mean, it was. I thought it was a solid performance by him. Klinsmann was I was happy about his performance, and that's why you get the full 90. And in all honesty, I don't know if I've seen a game where Jozy has gone the full 90 and not looked gassed.
Yeah. Well, and I think
I thought stamina surprised me there for a second.
I think what you're talking about when you say you don't know why everybody's bitching and moaning about Jozy is I don't really think everybody understands what his role is on that team. And his role is to hold the ball and get the midfield involved. I mean, really, that is his role. That is not something Johansson's going to do. It's not really something Wondolowski's going to do. And in some ways, it's not something Dempsey's very, adept at either in that spot. So if you understand what his job is, and then you judge him by those standards, then maybe you won't feel so bad. Listen, not every striker is, a cutting, slashing, take out or fake out 3 guys and score. That's not really what he's supposed to do up there. And I think people need to judge him based on the assignment that he's given by Jurgen Klinsmann. And that is the assignment he's been given. Now, you want to judge him by those standards? Fine. But don't judge him by the same standards you would judge Johansson or Wondolowski, because they're playing off of Jozy. You know what? That's their role, is to play off of the guy holding the ball. That's not really the guy the striker that gets to hold the forward that gets to hold the ball. That's not the glorious, role, right? That's the hard-working, turn with your back to the goal, blocking off guys just as big as you, center backs. That's
drawing fouls.
Yeah, that's the dirty work stuff.
He was beat up last night.
It does not, it does not come off as a glorious job. And when you do your job, for the most part, and people still take a crap on you, that can't feel good. And, I just hope people at least come to understand what his role is on that, what Jurgen is asking him to do. Now, would I like Jozy to score a goal? I would eventually.
Of course.
Of course I would. But I don't think that people really get that he's doing something that the rest of the forwards that have been picked for this team cannot do. And that's hold the ball, because he's a big dude. He weighs a lot. He's hard to move. Although he does go down quite easily sometimes.
Sometimes, yes.
For a big dude, he can drop like a sack of potatoes. And by the way, he did get us several free kicks doing that sack of potatoes act last night. So it works.
Well, to be fair, most of those the quote-unquote sack of potato hits, he was actually hit a number of times. I don't recall a single time looking at that and saying, Jozy, why are you flopping?
That's true. Last night,
I think pretty much every single foul he drew was an actual foul.
Mm-hmm. Last night, he was not the fabled sack of potatoes we've seen in the past. Those were some pretty hard fouls, although he still felt like a sack of potatoes. It was a legitimate sack of potatoes. All right, until the next time on the Straight Red Card, this is Brett and Derek, and we'll see you next time. Take care.